Alright guys, so I ended up getting the instructions from Science of Speed. They emailed it to me. It actually doesn't seem too bad to do, the intercooler portion. So basically what you start off with is you take this bracket off and you install it in the car, which then allows you to install the container in the car. And then you have to drill a hole into your battery tray to secure the water pump, and then from there you're pretty much just routing hoses between the pump and the reservoir. And then you have to basically shift this bracket up by like 2 inches, 3 inches, and cut some of the bracket off to allow you to install the intercooler under it. And then you just finish routing those hoses there, and from the looks of it, then you run the hoses to the rear of the car, which goes to the aftercooler, and you wire the pump to one of the fuse boxes up here, and that kind of is it, which doesn't seem too bad now that I'm seeing the instruction set. So my goal for today is to do all that minus hooking up the hoses to the rear aftercooler, because I have to still drop the gas tank to do the fuel pump, which I'll probably do tomorrow. So let's get to it. So first things first, I'm going to cut this bracket off this tire off to release the bracket from that. So this is the bracket, and I will show you where it's basically gonna go. So this bracket gets installed behind here. The only thing that kind of stinks for me is I'm actually using that for my external reservoirs for the coilovers, so I'm gonna probably try to fit it between that line and see how that works, and then hopefully it'll be good. We'll see. Probably gonna have to undo this line so I can get access to this one. Something's going on where it's now doesn't feel good going in, so I'm going to try to fix it and then we'll get back to it. Alright guys, so basically I think I kind of screwed up, and when I installed the hardware it wasn't really that long, so when I tightened it, it just deformed the first couple threads. So now when I'm threading it in, it just catches the first couple threads and doesn't actually fully go in. So what I did was I bought a size 6 metric tap, and what I'm planning to do is I'm going to tap it. And I also bought some 35 millimeter screws. So instead of using the 25, I believe it's a 25 millimeter. I think it's a 25 millimeter screw that comes with the kit. Yeah, so instead of using a 25 millimeter screw into that hole, I got a 35 millimeter one. And I'm gonna see if I can still use my existing bracket location plus that to secure both the pipe the external reservoir and my new bracket in place. So first I have to fix the hole. So I'm going to try to do that right now. Kind of wondering if I should drill an extra hole so I could bolt through, and then everything is secured and it's just gonna be like ½ inch closer, which I think is fine. I'm not going to over tighten it because I don't know how much threads are really left in that bracket, but I think I pretty much have it secured as tight as I can. Then the last bit is to put the screw back in to hold that line. Here. So I have to change this back to number 10. I think it needs some washers under it to act as a spacer. Because right now, it's just bending that bracket, which is not good. Alright, I think I have everything I need secured. So the next part is installing this here. So the instructions say for the next part we're to use a 20 mil long flange bolt, hex bolt, and place 6 millimeter oversized washer between bolt head and plastic reservoir. Alright, so that reservoir is in place. So the next part is we have to drill, I'm going to take this stud out because it's going to get in the way. This is for the sciences, the downforce air scoop to this. So basically next I have to drill a 1/4 inch hole. I have to drill a 1/4 inch hole 2 1/8 inch inward here to allow the bracket for the water pump to secure it. So I'll do that next. So I'm gonna measure, it's I believe 2 1/8. Yeah, the instruction says 2 1/8 from the center of that hole. And actually I should use my center punch to, I would recommend this. This is nice because it kind of dents right where you want to drill your hole. The next part is installing the water pump. Alright, so basically what it's saying is to install it kind of like this. So your flange nut, your oversized washer, then the bracket, then this between the bracket and the tray, and then this nut is what secures it from the bottom side. Alright, so I would think somewhere around there is about right. Reading ahead, before I install this, it tells you to install, then basically wire this up to the fuse holder. I feel like it makes more sense to do all the terminations and crimps on a workbench, then install it. So I'm gonna just, I kind of laid it in, saw how long I thought this wire would be, which tells you to go to a ground point and cut it already. So I'm just gonna crimp, basically strip some of it off so I can crimp a lug on it. Okay. Alright guys, I did a test fit and it appears you do need all this length. So I'm just going to go ahead and crimp it together. Really the clocking of the crimp doesn't really matter because when you loosen this fuse holder, it's going to kind of pop apart. But basically you can twist this relative to the other end. So you don't really have to worry too much about how you've crimped it on either end, to be honest. Because you can just loosen the fuse holder and adjust your clocking, and then tighten this to get the clocking set. So with that said, I'm going to crimp this together, and then on top of that there's this nice supplied corrugated stuff, so you can actually run your wire in this and protect it. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, and I'm gonna tape that. So basically, this is, I believe, how you would want it to look like before you install it on the car, just so it's easier to deal with afterwards. I also went and installed the clamping hardware. You can kind of see on the bottom side there's like a nut and a screw, just so that I guess it secures it more tightly to the water pump. So I'm going to go ahead and reposition the camera so we can install that. Alright guys, so this is how the water pump kind of looks right now. I'm going to go ahead, I pretty much pre-assembled the washers like I previously showed you. Put the the rubber washers under it, and I'm gonna get under the car and put these two nuts on to secure it in place. So the water pump's installed. What I'm going to do is now route this over or under and basically connect it to that stud. And it basically tells you to use one of these to secure it down to the stud. Next is routing this guy. There we go. So now I can run this up and over. So I basically ran the wire under the fuse, or under the pump, between the bracket and this like hump. So now what's gonna happen is basically the wire that's going to the fuse box to here is also leading this wire to the fuse box as well. So I think that's like the cleanest setup I can have. So I'm gonna what I'll probably do is just tape this together right there. So now this is installed, wired up to the fuse box. Next part is I'm going to install the heat exchanger. Once that's done, I'll do the tubing to basically the water pump and the reservoir and to the back to the car, because that will all be what's left. But because you're gonna see something, I'm gonna try to put this in the instruction package does tell you about this, so it's not like no known. You're gonna have to do this per the instructions. But if you look, basically this is kind of in your way. This bolt is supposed to go to here, but you can't because this is in your way. So what you have to do is basically kind of shift this up and cut this bracket here to allow this heat exchanger to get in place. So I'm gonna work on doing that next. All right, so basically there's a clamp here that's securing this, I guess, refrigerant bottle. I'm not really sure what it is. And these two bolts. So I'm gonna loosen the clamp, then take these two bolts out so I can basically remove the clamp off, and then I'm gonna cut off. So this is the bracket you need to modify, and what you're doing is you're cutting this tab off, basically the bottom support tab. You don't really need it because you're clamping it either way, and then that allows you to push this up. So that's what I'm going to do next. So this actually wasn't that bad to cut. I thought I was going to need an angle like a grinding or cutting wheel, but in reality all I did was I just have this pair of Milwaukee tin snips, and I was able to just kind of slowly cut through. Doesn't really require too much effort, and yeah, cuts pretty quick and easy. So I guess with that said, I'll go ahead and put this bracket back on. So that one's in. So basically this will be here. And that's gonna sit like that.
Alright, basically, these aren't needed, these brackets. I think they updated the design of the heat exchanger to have riv nuts in it. So this is used to be what would hold your bottom hardware in place. Now it's the riv nuts. So disregard these. That picture in their process is a little confusing, and it's not really necessary anymore. I have the reservoir in, the front heat exchanger is in, the water pump is in. I did something to I loosened the two bottom bolts and kind of turned this a little bit and retightened it. I did that because this elbow that I have was going to be touching this front sway bar. So I ended up basically cutting the elbow slightly. I removed about, let me see if I can find it. I removed about that much, I would say like 1/2 inch off the elbow, just to make the elbow a little tighter. And then I have the clamp loose here. I'll put another clamp loose here, and then that should allow me to continue routing the hoses to and from the intercooler and all that stuff, or the heat exchanger I should say. So basically, next up, I'm going to do the rest of the plumbing and then try to secure the front ducting and finish basically mounting the front heat exchanger. So basically, next up, I need to basically route here to here. So that's that hose installed. I'm gonna route the hose to the front intercooler, so I probably have to bring those over to cut them to length. So again, Science Speed provides you with the pre-cut hose. So I think what I'm gonna do is basically, it looks like your hose comes through this gap. So I'm gonna try to feed as much as I can up so it's not touching this, and it's more just resting on this kind of cable harness here. So then basically I'm gonna cut this to length because this is too much length, and I think work its way in. I just cut myself. Yeah, cut myself. So wear gloves because the clamps will slice into your hand. So let me go bandage. Alright, after much struggle, I was finally able to get the hose on, and basically now I can tighten these clamps. To secure it, it was a workout. What I would think, as a takeaway from my experience, is you want to do this line, the elbow and the 3-foot section to the heat exchanger. Do it on the, like on a workbench. Don't do it installed in the car, because it is hard to do this while it's in the car. It's really tight. I think the 5/8 hose is a little thinner than the others, so that's why it's hard to install. So basically everything's tightened here, nice and secure. Now I'm going to move the camera over. The last part is tightening this. After kind of just messing with the hoses a little, I think I got it to the point that the hose actually does not touch the duct. It's sitting maybe like 1/4 inch under it. So I think that's good. There should be like no rubbing issues. You can see it's mounted there. This is actually going to go back and up a little bit, which is going to give us a little more length on that end once this is bolted in place. So I believe now I have to run the hose, the 2 long hoses from these points over to the rear of the car. So I'm going to do that next. Alright guys, so per the instructions, it basically says I need to grab the 17-foot long piece. It's a 5/8 hose, or 5/8 inner diameter hose, and basically route it from this point all the way to the back of the car. It does say you kind of route it, attach it to the ABS bracket, go under the radiator hose and go under the car that way, and then feed it back. And basically I'm just gonna leave it coiled under the car at this point, because the next thing I gotta do tomorrow, like I mentioned, was take the fuel tank out so I can do the fuel pump. But because the diagram kind of says the side that has the water pump is the hot side, this means therefore this is going to be the cold side, which would be basically going into the after cooler over there. So what I'm going to do is mark both ends with blue, again signifying it's the cold side, and the red on the other side, just so I don't lose track of which hose is which. So I'm just going to mark this with blue tape. I believe under this guy, seems like it would be better to go above reality. I think I'm going to go above it. Might be deviating from what they say, but basically this hose, or this wire loom, which is running in that same exact area that they're telling me to basically route the cable through, or this hose through, and it's tie wrapped there, so I can't even get by that. So I think it makes more sense to go over that. Probably doesn't really matter. What I might do is get a grommet. They sell these like little clip-on grommets, so you can kind of protect stuff from sharp edges like that. So I might just do that. Basically, I'm just going to try to route this hose through this bracket. So I've installed the hose. It's running above, or like within this and above it, to transfer over here, basically. And then I'm going to secure it with like a tie wrap here, and it runs according to what it says. You run it under these hoses, so I'm going to run it that way. I'll probably tie it up something or secure it somehow so it doesn't touch this bracket here, or this subframe piece. And then I basically have the hose running here. I'm gonna basically run all the lengths. I'm gonna go run the other one, which I think is gonna come from over here above, and I'll probably try to secure it to these lines because I think that's the AC line, so there shouldn't be much heat transferring through those, and at least the foam insulation would help keep the heat, you know, from transferring to these hoses. Actually, it probably could just sit right over the steering rack. Yeah, there's no problem. It could just sit on the steering rack. There's no concern there. So I'm gonna just let it sit on the steering rack and then run across in that direction over to the rear of the car. And that's basically it. So now I'm gonna grab the other hose, run it, and like I mentioned before, I've already marked the end with red blue tape on this one, so I'll put red tape on the others to signify that's the hot side. And that'll be it. Basically, you can see that the entrance for this hose will probably come right from above the battery housing here. So I'm gonna go under the car now and try to just pull the hose along with the other hose path, and then that way it's all secured properly. Basically, I'm gonna keep feeding this back. Alright, so as you can see, the hose is pretty much right where I want it. Just like the other one, and I think it's the same hose. So basically it's these 5/8 hoses that aren't elbows. They're really tight. Well, I'm just gonna keep working that until it's in. Maybe I'll squirt a little alcohol and see what happens. Just pause the video. This is tough. Putting these hoses on sucks. I complained a lot about a lot of stuff on this project. I'm just lazy. So I'm going to try to pass the clamp back. I'm assuming it fell. Alright. Clamps in. Everything's secured. It's not sitting on the radiator hose. Everything is in. I'll get some grommet to put on this edge and that edge. And I believe with that, I should be done with the front side. There's like no stress on that. So that's good. So what I'm going to do now is install the front radiator shroud, trim it as needed, and then I'm going to stop here for tonight because basically the rest of the hose is just the rear heat exchanger. And then later on I'll fill the system, run, circulate, and all that stuff per the instructions for the intercooler. But for now, I'm not going to bother filling it up because the other end's not attached. I trimmed the radiator shroud a lot to be able to like clear the heat exchanger So now I'm just gonna get the hardware in. I think I'm gonna have to get more of those clips, because these aren't holding very well anymore. But that's pretty much it. Heat exchangers in, all the hose and tubing is routed. Basically, the last bit is clipping these in here. So basically, I got this prepped, except the bumper basically, and I have to bolt it in from front. I'm gonna wait till I got it all full and I can verify nothing's leaking before I put the bumper on. But basically everything's kind of wired how it should be. Like I mentioned, I'm probably gonna try to get a grommet to put here, another grommet to put right here, just in case. And yeah, looks good.